I still remember the exact moment I realized we had made a terrible mistake. It was not when we first saw the farmhouse standing alone against the gray Nebraska sky. It was not when we stepped inside and felt the unnatural cold seep into our bones despite the summer heat outside. No, it was when I woke up at 3:47 a.m. on our third night there and saw my younger sister standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me with eyes that were not her own, whispering words in a language I had never heard before. That is when I knew something evil had been waiting for us in that house, and we had just given it exactly what it wanted. My name is James, and I am 24 years old. What I am about to tell you happened 6 months ago, but it feels like a lifetime. Some nights, I still wake up drenched in sweat, hearing those whispers echoing through the walls. Before you continue listening to this story, I want you to do something for me. Leave a comment below telling me if you have ever experienced something you could not explain, something that made you question reality itself. Because after what happened to my family and me, I know we are not alone in this world. There are things out there, things that wait in the shadows, things that feed on fear and pain. And sometimes we invite them in without even knowing it. The farmhouse sat 3 miles outside the small town of Millbrook, Nebraska, population 847. My parents had found it online during one of their late-night house hunting sessions. After my father lost his job at the accounting firm in Chicago, and after the medical bills from my mother's surgery had drained our savings, they decided we needed a fresh start somewhere cheaper, somewhere quieter. The farmhouse seemed perfect. 4 bedrooms, 2 acres of land, and a price so low it almost seemed like a gift. I remember my mother showing me the listing on her laptop. "Look at this, James," she said, her eyes bright with hope for the first time in months. "We could actually afford this. Your sister could have her own room. We could start over." I was skeptical. At 24, I had just finished my degree in graphic design and was working freelance jobs from home. The thought of leaving Chicago, leaving my friends and the few clients I had built relationships with, filled me with dread. But when I looked at my mother's face, at the exhaustion etched into every line, at the way my father sat hunched over the kitchen table with his head in his hands, I knew I could not say no. "It looks great, Mom," I lied. My younger sister Emily, who was 16, was less diplomatic. "It looks like a horror movie set," she said, peering at the screen. "Are we sure someone did not die there?" My mother laughed, but it sounded forced. "Do not be dramatic, Emily. It is just old. That is why it is so affordable." We made the drive from Chicago to Millbrook on a Saturday in late July. The moving truck followed behind us, carrying everything we owned. As we left the city behind and drove deeper into the rural heartland, I watched the landscape change through the car window. Skyscrapers gave way to strip malls, which gave way to fields of corn and soybeans stretching endlessly in every direction. Emily sat beside me in the back seat, earbuds in, staring at her phone. She had not spoken to our parents since we left. She was angry about the move, angry about leaving her friends and her school and everything familiar. I could not blame her. "How much longer?" I asked my father, who was driving. "GPS says another 40 minutes, he replied, glancing at the phone mounted on the dashboard. Those 40 minutes felt like hours. The towns grew smaller and farther apart. The fields seemed to go on forever, broken only by the occasional farmhouse or barn. The sky was overcast, a uniform gray that pressed down on everything like a weight. Finally, we turned off the main highway onto a narrow 2-lane road, then onto an even narrower gravel road, then onto what was barely more than a dirt track, cutting through a field of tall grass that rustled in the wind. And then we saw it. The farmhouse stood at the end of the long driveway, a 2-story structure with white paint that had long since faded to a dingy gray. The roof sagged slightly in the middle. Several of the shutters hung at odd angles. A large oak tree grew close to the house on the left side, its branches scraping against the 2nd-story windows when the wind blew. But it was the silence that struck me first. As soon as my father turned off the engine, I realized I could not hear anything. No birds, no insects, no distant traffic, just the wind moving through the grass and the creaking of that oak tree. "Well," my mother said, her voice artificially bright, "here we are, our new home." Nobody moved. We all just sat there staring at the house. "It is bigger than I thought," my father said finally. Emily pulled out her earbuds. "It looks haunted." "Emily," my mother said sharply, "that is enough. Come on, everyone out. The moving truck will be here soon and we have a lot of work to do." We climbed out of the car and stood in the overgrown driveway, looking up at the house. It seemed to loom over us, even though it was only 2 stories tall. The windows were dark and empty, like eyes that had been watching the road, waiting for us to arrive. My father pulled the keys from his pocket and walked up the creaking porch steps. The front door was solid wood, painted a dark red that had faded to brown in places. He fumbled with the lock for a moment before the door swung open with a long, low groan. Cool air rushed out to meet us, and I felt goosebumps rise on my arms despite the summer heat. "Why is it so cold?" Emily asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "Old houses are always cooler," my mother said, though she was rubbing her arms too. "The thick walls keep out the heat. It will be nice in the summer." We stepped inside. The interior was dim, with only the gray light from the windows to see by. We were standing in a large entryway with a staircase directly ahead of us leading to the second floor. To the left was what looked like a living room. To the right, a dining room. The wood floors were scuffed and dusty, and the wallpaper was peeling in places, revealing older layers underneath. But it was the smell that got to me. Not the musty smell of an old house that had been closed up for too long. This was something else. Something like turned earth and rot, and something I could not quite identify. Something organic and wrong. "It just needs to air out," my mother said, as if reading my mind. She walked to the nearest window and tried to open it. It would not budge. "James, help me with this." I crossed to her side, and together we pushed on the window frame. After a moment, it gave way with a screech of old wood and opened. Warm air flowed in, but it did nothing to dispel the cold that seemed to emanate from the house itself. "I am going to check out the upstairs," Emily announced, already heading for the staircase. "Be careful," my mother called after her. "We do not know what condition the floors are in." I watched my sister climb the stairs, her footsteps echoing through the empty house. Then I turned to explore the ground floor. The living room had a large stone fireplace that dominated one wall. The mantel was thick with dust. The wallpaper here was a faded floral pattern that might have been cheerful once but now just looked sad and forgotten. I ran my finger along the mantel, leaving a clean streak through the dust. How long had this house been empty? From somewhere upstairs I heard Emily call out, "There are 4 bedrooms up here, and the bathroom is huge." "That is wonderful, honey," my mother called back. I moved through the dining room and into the kitchen. It was larger than I expected, with old wooden cabinets and a deep farmhouse sink. The countertops were worn formica, and the linoleum floor was cracked in places. But the appliances looked relatively new, probably updated by the previous owners at some point. There was a door at the back of the kitchen. I opened it and found myself looking down a set of steep wooden stairs into darkness. The basement. A rush of even colder air flowed up from below, carrying with it that strange smell again, stronger now. I closed the door quickly. "James, can you help your father with the boxes?" My mother called from somewhere deeper in the house. I walked back through the kitchen and found my parents in what must have been a study or office, a small room off the dining room with built-in bookshelves lining the walls. "The moving truck just pulled up," my father said. "Let us get started." For the next several hours we unloaded the truck, carrying boxes and furniture into the house. The movers helped with the heavy stuff, the couch and beds and dressers, but there was still so much to do. By the time the truck pulled away, it was late afternoon and we were all exhausted. We ate dinner sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes, pizza that we had picked up in town on the way. Nobody talked much. We were all too tired, and I think we were all still processing the reality of this place, this house that was supposed to be our new beginning but felt more like an ending. "I think we should call it a night," my mother said finally. "We can start unpacking properly tomorrow. Let us at least get the bed set up so we can sleep." That took another hour, but eventually we had all 4 bedrooms on the second floor set up with at least the basics. My room was at the front of the house, overlooking the driveway. Emily's was next to mine. Our parents took the master bedroom at the back. By the time I finally collapsed into my bed, it was after 10:00 p.m. I was so exhausted that I thought I would fall asleep immediately, but I did not. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house, and that is when I first heard them, the sounds. At first I thought it was just the normal sounds of an old house settling, creaks and groans, the wind against the windows, but then I heard something else. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps coming from somewhere above me. But there was nothing above me. My room was on the second floor. There was only the attic above that, and the entrance to it was locked. We had checked earlier. I sat up in bed, listening intently. The footsteps continued, moving from one side of the ceiling to the other, back and forth, back and forth. Then they stopped. I waited in the silence, my heart pounding. After a long moment, I lay back down and told myself it was nothing. Old houses made sounds. That was normal. That was expected. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, suddenly aware of how cold the room had become. I could see my breath misting in the air in front of my face. It is just the first night, I told myself. It will get better. But even as I thought it, I knew it was not true. From somewhere downstairs, I heard a door creak open slowly. Then close. Then open again. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore it. That was our first mistake. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through my window and the sound of birds singing outside. For a moment, I could not remember where I was. Then it all came back. The farmhouse, Nebraska, our new home. I checked my phone. 8:23 a.m. I had slept later than I meant to, but considering how exhausted I had been, it was not surprising. The strange sounds from the night before seemed less frightening in the daylight. Just old house noises, I told myself again. I got dressed and headed downstairs. The smell of coffee led me to the kitchen, where my mother was already up and unpacking boxes. "Good morning," she said, smiling. She looked more rested than she had in weeks. "Sleep well." "Fine," I lied. "Where is everyone else?" "Your father went into town to get some supplies. Emily is still sleeping." She handed me a cup of coffee. "I thought we could start unpacking the kitchen today, make this place feel more like home." We spent the morning working together, putting dishes in cabinets and organizing the pantry. It felt good to have something concrete to do, something that made the house feel less foreign. By lunchtime, we had made real progress. That is when I noticed it. I had unpacked a box of glasses and set them on the counter while I cleared space in the cabinet to put them away. When I turned back to get them, they had been moved. They were now sitting on the other side of the counter, neatly arranged in a row. "Mom, did you move these glasses?" She looked up from the drawer she was organizing. "What glasses?" "These," I pointed. "I left them over there, but now they are here." She walked over and looked at them, then at me. "James, you probably just forgot where you put them. We have been unpacking all morning." "No, I'm sure I left them over there." "Well, I did not move them." She went back to her drawer. "Maybe you are just tired." I stared at the glasses for a moment longer, then shook my head. She was probably right. I had been distracted, probably just forgot. But I knew I had not moved them. Emily came downstairs around 1, p.m., looking tired and irritable. She had dark circles under her eyes. "Did you sleep okay?" my mother asked. "Not really," Emily said, pouring herself some orange juice. "I kept hearing weird sounds." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of sounds?" "I do not know, like someone walking in the hallway, and my door kept opening. I must have gotten up to close it like 5 times. My mother frowned. "The door kept opening." "Yeah, I would close it, and then a few minutes later it would just be open again. It is annoying." "It is probably just not latching properly," my mother said. "Your father can look at it when he gets back." But I saw the look on her face. She did not believe that any more than I did. My father returned in the early afternoon with supplies from the hardware store in town. He spent the rest of the day working on small repairs around the house, fixing loose floorboards and adjusting doors. He checked Emily's door, adjusted the latch, and declared it fixed. That night we ate dinner together in the dining room, sitting at the table we had finally assembled. It almost felt normal. Almost. "I met some of the neighbors today," my father said between bites of spaghetti. "Or rather, the closest thing to neighbors we have out here. A couple lives about a mile down the road, the Hendersons. They seemed nice enough." "Did they say anything about the house?" I asked. My father paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I just wondered if they knew anything about its history. How long it has been empty, who lived here before." "They said it had been vacant for about 2 years. Before that, an elderly woman lived here alone. She passed away and her family put the house on the market." He took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. "They said she was a bit of a recluse, kept to herself mostly." "Did they say anything else about her?" my mother asked. "Not really, just that she had lived here for a very long time, decades I think." We ate in silence for a while after that. I noticed Emily kept glancing toward the doorway that led to the living room, as if she expected to see something there. "What is it?" I asked her. She jumped slightly. "Nothing, I keep feeling like someone is watching us." "Emily, please," my mother said, her voice strained. "Not tonight." "I am not making it up," Emily insisted. "I can feel it." I could feel it too, but I did not say anything. After dinner, I helped clean up and then retreated to my room. I tried to do some work on my laptop, responding to emails from clients and working on a logo design, but I could not concentrate. The house was too quiet. Even the normal sounds, the creaks and groans, seemed louder than they should be. Around 11:00 p.m., I decided to call it a night. I changed into my pajamas, brushed my teeth in the bathroom down the hall, and climbed into bed. I left my bedside lamp on. I must have dozed off because I woke suddenly to the sound of my door creaking open. I sat up, my heart racing, and looked toward the doorway. The door was standing wide open. Beyond it, the hallway was dark. "Emily," I called out. "Mom." No response. I got out of bed and crossed to the door. The hallway was empty. I looked toward Emily's room. Her door was closed. So were my parents' door at the far end of the hall. I stepped into the hallway, and that is when I felt it. The cold. It was so intense that I gasped, my breath misting in front of me. The temperature had to have dropped 30 degrees in seconds. And then I heard it, a whisper, so faint I almost thought I had imagined it. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I could not make out the words, but the sound of it made my skin crawl. I backed into my room quickly and closed the door, turning the lock. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, listening. The whispering continued for a few more seconds, then stopped. I hurried back to my bed and pulled the covers over me, even though they did nothing to stop the cold. I kept my eyes on the door, watching for any sign of movement. The door stayed closed. But I did not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I found Emily in the kitchen, looking even worse than she had the day before. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she was drinking coffee even though she usually hated it. "You look terrible," I said. "Thanks," she muttered. "I feel terrible." "Did you sleep at all?" She shook her head. My door kept opening. I finally put a chair in front of it, but then I just lay there all night listening to footsteps in the hallway. "I heard them too," I admitted. She looked at me and I saw real fear in her eyes. "What is wrong with this house, James?" Before I could answer, my mother came into the kitchen. She looked tired too, I noticed. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Good morning," she said, but her voice lacked its usual energy. "Mom, did you hear anything strange last night?" Emily asked. My mother paused in the act of reaching for a coffee mug. "Like what?" "Like footsteps, like doors opening and closing, like whispers." My mother turned to face us. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny it, to tell us we were just imagining things. But then her shoulders sagged. "Yes," she said quietly, "I heard things." "So it is not just us," I said. "It is an old house," my mother said, but she did not sound convinced. "Old houses make sounds." "Mom, this is more than just sounds," Emily said. "Something is wrong here." "We just need time to adjust," my mother insisted. "It has only been 2 days, give it a chance." But even as she said it, I saw her glance toward the doorway, just like Emily had done at dinner, like she was checking to make sure we were alone. We were not. I could feel it watching us. That afternoon, I decided to explore the property outside. I needed to get out of the house, needed fresh air and sunshine and the feeling of open space around me. The house felt like it was pressing in on me, getting smaller by the hour. I walked the perimeter of the property, through the tall grass that rustled around my legs. The land stretched out in all directions, fields and more fields, with only the occasional tree to break the monotony. In the distance, I could see the roof of what must have been the Hendersons' house. I made my way around to the back of our house and found something I had not noticed before. A small cemetery, surrounded by a rusted iron fence. There were perhaps a dozen headstones, most of them so old and weathered that I could not read the names. I pushed open the gate, which squealed on rusty hinges, and walked among the graves. Most of them dated back to the 1800s. A family cemetery, probably for the original owners of the farmhouse. One grave was newer than the others. The headstone was simple gray granite, and the name was clearly visible: Eleanor Marsh, 1930 Fort 2023. The old woman who had lived here, the recluse. She was buried here on the property with what must have been her ancestors. I stood there for a long moment looking down at the grave. The grass around it had grown tall, untended. Had she had no family, no friends to care for her final resting place? A breeze picked up, rustling the tall grass around me, and I heard it again. That whisper, faint but unmistakable, riding on the wind. I turned and hurried back to the house, glancing over my shoulder at the cemetery. I could have sworn I saw a shadow moving among the headstones, but when I looked directly at it, there was nothing there. That evening, while we were eating dinner, we heard a crash from upstairs. It was so loud that we all jumped. My father was on his feet immediately. "Stay here," he said, and ran for the stairs. We waited in tense silence. After a moment, my father called down, "James, can you come up here?" I climbed the stairs and found him standing in the doorway of his bedroom, staring inside. I looked past him and felt my blood run cold. Every picture frame in the room had fallen off the walls and dressers. Not just fallen, but thrown. They were scattered across the floor, the glass shattered, and the pictures had been torn from the frames. "How did this happen?" my father asked, but he was not really asking me. He was just speaking out loud, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. I walked into the room carefully, avoiding the broken glass. All of the pictures were of our family. My parents' wedding photo, pictures of Emily and me as children, our last family vacation. and someone or something had torn the faces out of every single one. "Dad," I said quietly, "we need to talk about this house." He turned to look at me, and I saw that his hands were shaking. "It is just, maybe there was a vibration or—" "Dad, stop. You know this was not a vibration." He ran a hand through his hair. "What do you want me to say, James? That our house is haunted? That is ridiculous." "Is it? Look around you." He looked at the destroyed photographs, at the torn faces, and I saw his resolve crumble. "What do we do?" he asked. "I do not know," I admitted, "but we cannot keep pretending this is normal." We cleaned up the mess together, sweeping up the broken glass and gathering the ruined photographs. My mother and Emily came upstairs to help, and nobody said much. We were all too shaken. That night none of us slept well. I know because every time I woke up, which was often, I could hear movement in the other rooms. Footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, and underneath it all that constant whispering just at the edge of hearing. Around 4:00 a.m., I heard my mother scream. I was out of bed and into the hallway before I had fully processed what I was doing. Emily was already there, standing outside our parents' room. My father came running up the stairs from downstairs. We found my mother sitting up in bed, sobbing, with all the lights on. "Mom, what happened?" Emily asked, rushing to her side. My mother was shaking so hard she could barely speak. She pushed up the sleeves of her nightgown and we all saw them. Bruises, dark purple bruises, forming finger marks on both of her arms. "Something grabbed me," she whispered. "I was asleep and something grabbed me and held me down. I could not move, could not scream. It was so strong." My father sat beside her and pulled her into his arms. "It is okay. You are safe now." But we all knew that was not true. Whatever was in this house with us, it was getting bolder. And it was getting angry. The next day, my mother refused to be left alone. She followed my father around while he did work around the house, and when he had to go into town for more supplies, she insisted we all go with him. The drive into Millbrook was quiet. None of us wanted to talk about what had happened to my mother, but it hung in the air between us like a dark cloud. In town, while my parents were at the hardware store, Emily and I wandered into a small cafe for coffee. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled as she poured our drinks. "You must be the folks who moved into the old Marsh place," she said. Word traveled fast in a small town, apparently. "Yes," I said. "How did you know?" "Honey, everyone knows everyone's business around here. How are you settling in?" I hesitated. Emily kicked me under the table, warning me not to say anything. "Fine," I lied. "It is an adjustment, but we are managing." The waitress nodded, but something in her expression changed. "That is good. That house has been empty for a while now. It is nice to see someone living there again." "Did you know the woman who lived there before?" Emily asked. "Eleanor Marsh." The waitress's smile faded completely. Everyone knew Eleanor. She was, well, she kept to herself mostly, especially in her later years. "What do you mean, especially in her later years?" I pressed. The waitress glanced around the cafe, as if checking to make sure no one else was listening. Then she leaned in closer and lowered her voice. "Look, I am not one for gossip, but you should know. Eleanor was not right in the head toward the end. She started saying strange things, doing strange things. People in town tried to help her, but she would not have it. She accused people of trying to steal from her, of poisoning her food, all kinds of crazy stuff." "What kind of strange things did she do?" Emily asked. "I probably should not say," the waitress said, straightening up. "It is not right to speak ill of the dead. She was a troubled woman, that is all. But she is gone now, and I am sure you will be just fine in that house." But the way she said it, the nervous glance she gave us, told me she did not believe that at all. When we got back to the farmhouse that afternoon, my father insisted we needed to spend the evening like a normal family. He set up the television in the living room, and we all gathered to watch a movie together. It was forced and awkward, but I appreciated the effort. About halfway through the movie, the temperature in the living room dropped suddenly. We all felt it. My father grabbed the remote and paused the movie. "Did anyone leave a window open?" he asked. "No," my mother said. "Everything is closed." We could all see our breath now, misting in the air. The cold was so intense it hurt to breathe. And then the lights went out. Not just the lights in the living room. Every light in the house went out at once, plunging us into complete darkness. "Stay calm," my father said, though his voice was shaking. "It is probably just a blown fuse." He got up and fumbled for his phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, and in its light I saw something that made my heart stop. There was a shadow in the doorway. A human-shaped shadow, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, moving in a way that did not quite match the movement of the flashlight beam. "Dad," I whispered, "do not move." He froze, his flashlight still pointed at the doorway. The shadow stood there for a long moment, and I swear I could feel it watching us. Then it moved, gliding across the doorway and disappearing into the darkness beyond. "Did everyone see that?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes," my mother whispered. The lights came back on as suddenly as they had gone out. We all sat there, blinking in the sudden brightness, staring at the empty doorway. "That is it," my mother said, standing up. "We are leaving, right now. We are going to a hotel in town, and tomorrow we are calling someone who can help us." None of us argued. We packed bags quickly, throwing in clothes and toiletries with shaking hands. My father kept looking over his shoulder, checking every shadow, every corner. We all did. As we were about to walk out the front door, Emily stopped. "Wait," she said. "Where is Mr. Whiskers?" Mr. Whiskers was her cat, a gray tabby she had had since she was 10. In all the chaos of the move, I had barely noticed him. "He is probably hiding under your bed," my mother said. "Emily, we can come back for him tomorrow." "No," Emily said firmly. "I am not leaving him here, not in this house." She ran back upstairs before anyone could stop her. I heard her calling for the cat, heard her moving around in her room. Then she screamed. We all ran up the stairs. I got there first and found Emily standing in the middle of her room, pointing at the wall. Written on the wall in what looked like dark red paint were 2 words: "Get out." But it was not paint. As I got closer, I could smell it. That same rotting smell that had been in the house since we arrived, only stronger now. It was blood. And below the words on the floor was Mr. Whiskers. He was not moving. Emily fell to her knees beside him, sobbing. My mother pulled her back, away from the body. "We are leaving now," my father said, his voice hard. "Everyone downstairs, now." We left the cat's body there. We left everything. We grabbed our bags and ran for the car, and my father drove us away from that house faster than I had ever seen him drive. None of us looked back. We checked into a small motel on the edge of Millbrook. It was cheap and worn, but it felt safe, normal. The heater worked. The lights stayed on. There were no shadows where shadows should not be. We sat together in my parents' room, trying to process what had just happened. "We need to call the police," Emily said. She had finally stopped crying, but her eyes were still red and swollen. "And tell them what?" my father asked. "That a ghost killed our cat and wrote a message on the wall in blood." "Something killed Mr. Whiskers," Emily shot back. "Something broke into our house." "Maybe it was an animal," my mother said, but she did not sound convinced. "A wild animal got in somehow." We all knew that was not true. "Tomorrow, we are finding someone who deals with this kind of thing," my father said. "There has to be someone, a priest or a paranormal investigator or something." "Do you even believe in that stuff?" I asked. He looked at me and his expression was grim. "I do not know what I believe anymore, but I know what I saw, what we all saw, and if there is even a chance that someone can help us, we have to try. That night I lay awake in the narrow motel bed, listening to the sounds of the highway beyond the window. Normal sounds, cars passing, the hum of the air conditioner, voices from the room next door. No footsteps, no whispers, no doors opening and closing. But I could not shake the feeling that something had followed us, that even here, miles away from the farmhouse, we were being watched. I thought about that shadow in the doorway, about the writing on Emily's wall, about my mother's bruises and the destroyed photographs and all the little things that had been building since we moved in. This was not random. Whatever was in that house, it did not want us there. It wanted us gone. Or maybe it wanted something else. Something worse. Before I share what happened next, I need to take a moment to ask you something. If you have made it this far in the story, if you are feeling that same cold dread that we felt, then please do me a favor. Hit that like button below. Subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because what happened to my family needs to be told. People need to know what is out there, waiting in the dark. And your support helps me keep sharing these stories. Now, let me tell you about the paranormal investigators. The next morning, my father made calls. Lots of calls. Most of the people he talked to thought he was crazy. One priest he contacted hung up on him. Another suggested he seek psychological help for the family. But finally, after more than a dozen calls, he found someone willing to help. Richard and Catherine Torres, paranormal investigators based out of Lincoln, about 2 hours away. They had a website full of case studies and testimonials, and while part of me wanted to dismiss them as frauds, I could not. We were desperate. My father arranged for them to meet us at a diner in Millbrook that afternoon. Emily refused to go, saying she never wanted to think about the farmhouse again, so she stayed at the motel with my mother. My father and I went to meet the investigators. I recognized them as soon as they walked in. Richard was in his mid-40s with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt. Catherine was younger, maybe early 30s, with short dark hair and intense eyes. She carried a leather bag slung over her shoulder. They slid into the booth across from us, and Richard extended his hand. "You must be the Whitfields," he said. "I am Richard, and this is my wife Catherine." We shook hands and ordered coffee. For a moment, nobody spoke. I think my father was struggling with how to begin. "Why do not you just tell us what has been happening?" Catherine said gently. "Start from the beginning. Do not leave anything out, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem." So we told them everything. The cold, the sounds, the moved objects, my mother's bruises, the destroyed photographs, the shadow in the doorway, the message on the wall, all of it. They listened without interrupting, and Catherine took notes in a small journal. When we finished, Richard leaned back in his seat and was quiet for a moment. "How much do you know about the history of the property?" he asked finally. "Not much," my father admitted. "Just that an old woman lived there for decades, Eleanor Marsh. She died a couple of years ago." "Eleanor Marsh," Richard repeated, glancing at Catherine. Something passed between them, recognition. "You have heard of her?" I asked. "We have heard stories," Catherine said carefully. "Nothing confirmed, just local legends. But there have been rumors about that property for years." "What kind of rumors?" Richard pulled out his phone and scrolled through it for a moment. "There is not much documented online, but I found a few mentions in local historical archives. The property has a long history. The house was built in 1847 by a man named Josiah Marsh. He and his family farmed the land." "Okay," my father said. "So it is an old farmhouse. That is not unusual for this area." "No, it is not," Richard agreed. "But what is unusual is what happened there over the years. There were multiple deaths on that property, going back to the 1800s. Children dying from illness. A barn fire that killed 3 people. A husband who supposedly went mad and took his own life." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And Alina," I asked, "what about her?" Catherine flipped through her notebook. Alina Marsh was the last descendant of the original family. She inherited the property and lived there alone for most of her adult life. According to what we found, she became increasingly reclusive in her later years. Some people in town thought she was mentally ill. "The waitress at the cafe mentioned that," I said. "But there are other stories," Richard continued. "Darker stories. Some people claimed she practiced witchcraft, that she held strange rituals in the house, that she was trying to commune with the spirits of her dead ancestors." "That sounds like small-town gossip," my father said skeptically. "Maybe," Catherine said, "but here is what we know for certain. Alina died alone in that house 2 years ago. She was not found for several days, and according to the coroner's report, which is public record, there were some unusual circumstances surrounding her death." "Like what?" I asked. "The room where she died was covered in strange symbols, drawn on the walls and floor in what appeared to be charcoal and other substances, and her body was positioned in a way that suggested ritual suicide." The diner suddenly felt too warm. I could feel sweat beading on my forehead. "Are you saying she cursed the house?" my father asked, "before she died?" "We are saying it is a possibility," Richard said. "If Alina believed she was communicating with spirits, if she was performing rituals, then it is possible she bound something to that property. Something dark." "Can you help us?" my father asked. "Can you make it stop?" Richard and Catherine exchanged another look. "We can try," Catherine said. "But you need to understand, if there really is something malevolent in that house, it will not give up easily. These entities feed on fear and negative energy. They grow stronger the more afraid you are." "So what do we do?" I asked. "First, we need to investigate," Richard said. "We need to go to the house, document what is happening, try to identify exactly what we are dealing with. Then we can determine the best course of action. But I need to be honest with you. This could be dangerous. If you do not feel comfortable going back to the house, we understand." My father and I looked at each other. I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear I felt. But I also saw determination. We could not just abandon the house. We had put everything we had into buying it. And more than that, we could not let whatever was there win. "We will do it," my father said. "Whatever it takes." We returned to the motel and told my mother and Emily about the plan. My mother was hesitant, but she agreed. Emily flatly refused to go back to the house. "I do not care what you do," she said. "I am not going back there, ever." We arranged for her to stay with the motel manager's daughter, a girl about her age. It was not ideal, but it was better than forcing her to return to the farmhouse. That evening, as the sun was setting, we met Richard and Catherine back at the house. They had brought equipment, lots of it. Cameras, audio recorders, devices I did not recognize. Standing in the driveway, looking up at the farmhouse again, I felt that same sense of dread I had felt the first time we arrived. The house seemed darker somehow, more menacing. The windows were like empty eyes watching us. "Before we go in," Richard said, "I want everyone to understand the rules. Stay together. Do not wander off alone. If you feel threatened or overwhelmed, speak up immediately. And most importantly, do not antagonize whatever is in there. Do not challenge it, do not taunt it. Show respect." "Respect," my father said, "for the thing that hurt my wife and killed our cat." "I know it is difficult," Catherine said, "but we need to approach this carefully. The entity is already hostile. We do not want to make things worse." We walked up to the front door. My father unlocked it, and it swung open with that same long groan I remembered from the first day. The smell hit us immediately. That rotting, organic smell, but so much stronger now. I covered my nose and mouth with my hand. "That is not good," Richard muttered. "That smell usually indicates a very powerful presence." We stepped inside. The house was completely dark, even though we had left lights on when we fled the night before. Catherine pulled out flashlights and handed them to us. The beams cut through the darkness as we moved through the entryway into the living room. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. The air itself seemed heavy, pressing down on us, and it was cold, so cold that our breath misted in the flashlight beams. Richard and Catherine began setting up their equipment. Cameras in each room, audio recorders, and something called an EMF detector that supposedly measured electromagnetic fields. "Why would that matter?" I asked. "Spirits can manipulate electromagnetic energy," Catherine explained. "If there is activity, this device will pick it up." As she spoke, the EMF detector in her hand suddenly began beeping rapidly, the lights on it flashing red. "That is a very high reading," she said, her voice tight. "There is definitely something here." We moved through the house slowly, room by room. The investigators took readings, made notes, recorded everything. When we reached the base of the stairs, we all stopped. From somewhere above us came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the second floor. "That is coming from Emily's room," my father said. We climbed the stairs together. The footsteps continued, back and forth, back and forth. When we reached the second floor hallway, they stopped. Emily's door was closed. We had left it open when we fled. Richard reached out and slowly turned the handle, pushing the door open. The room was destroyed, furniture overturned, clothes torn and scattered everywhere, and on the wall the message was still there. "Get out." But now there were more words beneath it, written in that same dark substance. "You were warned." Catherine immediately began taking pictures, while Richard set up a camera on a tripod, pointing it at the wall. "This is very aggressive behavior," Richard said. "Whatever is here, it wants you gone badly." "Why?" my mother asked. "What did we do?" "You are here," Catherine said simply. "You are living people, bringing light and life into a place that has been claimed by death. To the entity, you are intruders." "We need to try to communicate with it," Richard said. "Find out what it wants, why it is so angry." "Is that safe?" my father asked. "Probably not," Richard admitted. "But it is necessary if we are going to resolve this." We went back downstairs to the living room. Richard and Catherine arranged chairs in a circle and set up more equipment. Audio recorders, cameras, and the EMF detector, all positioned to capture whatever was about to happen. "Everyone sit down," Richard instructed. "We are going to attempt what is called an EVP session, electronic voice phenomenon. We will ask questions out loud, and hopefully, whatever is here will respond. We might not hear the responses in real time, but the recorders should pick them up." We sat in the circle, flashlights off now, with only the glow from the equipment to see by. The house was silent around us, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of something waiting, watching. Richard began. "If there is anyone here with us, we would like to communicate with you. We mean you no harm. We just want to understand." Silence. "My name is Richard. I am here with my wife Catherine and the family who now lives in this house. Can you tell us your name?" More silence. Then so faint I almost missed it, a sound, a whisper just like the ones I had been hearing. The EMF detector began beeping. "The entity is here," Catherine said quietly. "Keep going." "Are you Eileen Marsh?" Richard asked. "Are you the woman who lived in this house?" The temperature dropped even further. The EMF detector was going crazy now, lights flashing, beeping continuously. And then we heard it, a voice. Not a whisper this time, but a clear, angry voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Mine." We all jumped. My mother grabbed my father's hand. "This is your house?" Richard asked, keeping his voice calm. "You lived here." "Mine, always mine." "We understand," Catherine said. "This was your home, but Alina, you have passed on. You do not belong here anymore." The lights on the EMF detector suddenly went out. Then the audio recorders shut off. One by one, all the equipment powered down. We sat in complete darkness. "Richard," Catherine's voice came from somewhere to my left. "I am here. Everyone stay calm. This is just a power drain. It is common when—" He was cut off by a sound that made my blood run cold. A laugh. A horrible, wheezing, malevolent laugh that echoed through the house. And then something grabbed my ankle. I screamed and tried to pull away, but whatever had me was strong. I felt it dragging me backward, pulling me off my chair. My flashlight had fallen, rolling away across the floor, and in its spinning beam I saw it. A hand, gray and withered with long yellow nails. It was reaching up from beneath my chair, clawing at my leg. "James," my father shouted. He grabbed me under the arms and pulled. For a moment, I was caught between them, the thing pulling me down and my father pulling me up. Then, suddenly, the grip released and I fell forward into my father's arms. "Everyone out," Richard shouted. "Now." We scrambled for the door, stumbling over each other in the darkness. Behind us, I heard furniture being thrown, crashing into walls. The house itself seemed to be screaming, a high-pitched wail that felt like it was coming from the walls themselves. We burst out the front door and into the cool night air, gasping and shaking. My mother was crying. My father looked pale and shocked. Richard and Catherine stood in the driveway, staring back at the house. Every window was lit up from inside, but we had not turned on any lights. And in each window I could see shadows moving. Dozens of them, all human-shaped, all moving independently. "What is that?" I asked. "What are those things?" "Not just one entity," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "There are multiple spirits in that house, and they are all angry." We watched as the lights in the house began to flicker and then go out, one by one, until the house was dark again, silent again, waiting. "We cannot go back in there tonight," Richard said. "It is too dangerous, but now we know what we are dealing with. That house is not just haunted, it is infested." We spent the next day at the motel, planning. Richard and Catherine brought in books, old documents, anything they could find about the property and Alenear Marsh. What they discovered was worse than we had imagined. Alenear was not just practicing witchcraft, Catherine explained, spreading papers across the motel room desk. She was attempting necromancy, trying to bring back the spirits of her dead family members. "Why would she do that?" my mother asked. According to her journal, which we found excerpts of online in a local historical database, she was the last of the Marsh family. She had no children, no siblings, no one. She was completely alone, and in her isolation, she became obsessed with the idea of reuniting with her ancestors. Richard pulled out a photocopy of what looked like a handwritten journal page. The writing was shaky and erratic. "This was written about 6 months before she died," he said. "Listen to this. They are here now. I can feel them in the walls, in the floors, in the very air I breathe. My mother, my father, my brothers and sisters, all the Marshes who came before. They speak to me at night. They tell me I have done well. They tell me this house will be ours forever. No one else will ever take it from us." "She was insane," my father said. "Maybe," Catherine said. "Or maybe she succeeded. Maybe she really did bind the spirits of her ancestors to the house, and when she died, she joined them." "So what do we do?" I asked. "How do we get rid of them?" Richard leaned back in his chair. "A cleansing ritual, but it has to be powerful. We are not just dealing with one ghost here. We are dealing with potentially dozens of spirits, all of them bound to the property, all of them hostile to outsiders." "Will it work?" my mother asked. "Honestly," Catherine said, "I do not know. We have done cleansings before, but never on this scale. And if the spirits are as powerful as they seemed last night, they will fight back." "But we have to try," my father said. "We cannot just let them have the house. We have nowhere else to go. Everything we own is tied up in that property." "Then we go back tonight," Richard said. "We will prepare the ritual, but I need all of you to understand the risk. This could get violent. People have been hurt during cleansings before. In rare cases, people have been killed. The room was silent for a long moment. "I am going," my father said finally. "It is my responsibility." "I am going too," I said. My mother looked at both of us, then nodded. "We are in this together, as a family." Emily was not happy about the decision, but she understood. She hugged each of us before we left, holding on tighter and longer than usual. "Please be careful," she whispered. "We will," I promised, though I had no idea if I could keep that promise. We met Richard and Catherine back at the farmhouse just after sunset. They had brought supplies: candles, salt, bundles of dried sage, and other items I did not recognize. "Salt creates a barrier that spirits cannot cross," Catherine explained as we unloaded the car. "We will use it to create a protected space. The sage is for cleansing negative energy, and these," she held up several small leather pouches, "are protective amulets, one for each of you. Keep them on you at all times." I hung the pouch around my neck. It smelled like herbs and something else, something earthy and old. We stood in the driveway for a moment, looking up at the house. It looked the same as always, just an old farmhouse. But I knew better now. I knew what waited inside. "Are we ready?" Richard asked. No, I thought, but I nodded anyway. We walked to the front door. My father unlocked it, and it opened with that familiar groan. The smell was overwhelming now, so strong it made my eyes water. "Stay close," Richard said. "And remember, do not respond to anything the spirits say. Do not let them get inside your heads." We entered the house together. The temperature inside was below freezing. I could see frost forming on the walls and windows. Our breath came out in thick clouds. Richard and Catherine began setting up immediately. They poured lines of salt across the doorways and windows, creating a barrier. They lit candles and placed them in a circle in the center of the living room. They burned sage, the smoke filling the air. "Everyone stand inside the circle," Catherine instructed. We did as she said. Richard and Catherine stood on opposite sides of the circle, each holding a book. "When we begin the ritual," Richard said, "do not step outside the circle no matter what happens. The salt will protect you, but only if you stay inside it. Do you understand?" We all nodded. Richard opened his book and began to read. The words were in Latin, I think, ancient and powerful sounding. Catherine joined in, their voices rising and falling in a rhythmic chant. At first nothing happened. We stood there in the circle, watching, waiting. Then the candles began to flicker. The temperature dropped even further. I could feel ice forming in my eyelashes. And then they came. Shadows began to emerge from the walls, from the floors, from the ceiling. Dozens of them, humanoid but wrong, their proportions off, their movements too fluid. They circled around us, staying just beyond the ring of salt. Richard and Catherine continued their chant, their voices growing louder. One of the shadows moved closer to the circle. In the candlelight, I could almost see a face, an old woman's face, withered and angry. "Eleanor," Catherine said, not breaking her chant, "you must let go. You must release your hold on this place." The shadow that was Eleanor opened its mouth, and that horrible laugh came out again. "Mine," the voice said, "always mine. You cannot make us leave." "You are already gone," Richard shouted over the chanting. "Your bodies are dead. Your time here is over. You must move on." The shadows began to scream, all of them at once, a chorus of anguish and rage that was so loud I had to cover my ears. The candles flickered wildly, nearly going out. And then the house began to shake. It started as a tremor, like a small earthquake, but it quickly grew stronger. Picture frames fell from the walls. Furniture slid across the floor. Plaster cracked and fell from the ceiling. "Keep going," Catherine shouted to Richard. They continued their chant, faster now, more urgently. The shadows pressed closer to the circle, testing the salt barrier. I could see their hands, if you could call them hands, reaching toward us, trying to find a way through. One of the candles went out. "Do not let them extinguish the candles," Richard yelled. "We need the light." My father grabbed a lighter from his pocket and relit the candle, but as soon as he did, another one went out, then another. We were losing. The shadows were getting closer. I could feel cold radiating off them, so intense it burned. My mother was crying, holding onto my father. I stood frozen, watching as Alina's shadow moved right up to the edge of the circle. She reached out, her withered gray hand inches from my face. "Leave," she hissed. "Leave or die. This is our house, our house." And then something inside me snapped. The fear that had been building since we moved in, the terror of the last few days, all of it crystallized into anger. "No," I said. Alina's shadow tilted its head, as if surprised. "No," I said again louder. "This is not your house anymore. You are dead. You have been dead for years. Whatever Alina did, whatever curse she placed, it ends now. You do not belong here. You need to move on." The shadow screamed and lunged at me, but it hit the salt barrier and recoiled as if it had been burned. Richard and Catherine's chant reached a crescendo. They were shouting now, their words echoing through the shaking house. The shadows began to fade, not all at once but gradually, like smoke dissipating. They screamed and clawed at the air, but one by one they vanished. Alina's shadow was the last to go. She stared at me with those empty eyes, and for a moment I thought I saw something in them. Not anger, sadness. The profound sadness of someone who had been alone for so long that they could not bear to be alone even in death. "I am sorry," I said to her, "but you have to let go." She opened her mouth one last time, but no sound came out, and then she was gone. The house stopped shaking. The temperature began to rise. The oppressive feeling that had hung over everything since we arrived lifted, and for the first time the house felt empty, truly empty. Richard and Catherine stopped chanting. For a long moment nobody moved. We just stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. "Is it over?" my mother asked. Catherine pulled out the EMF detector and turned it on. She walked around the room, checking readings. "I am not picking up anything," she said. "The spirits are gone." We stood there for a while longer, waiting to see if anything else would happen, but the house remained quiet, still, normal. "We should go," my father said finally. "Even if they are gone, I do not want to spend another night here." Nobody argued. We gathered our things and walked out of the house. Richard and Catherine stayed behind to collect their equipment and make sure the cleansing had truly worked. As we stood in the driveway looking back at the farmhouse one last time, I realized it looked different. Not physically, but the feeling of it had changed. It was just a house now, an old, worn house, nothing more. "What do we do now?" my mother asked. "We leave," my father said. "First thing tomorrow we call a realtor. We sell this place and we find somewhere else to live, somewhere with no history, somewhere new." "You will lose money," I pointed out. "I do not care," he said. "Some things are more important than money." We drove back to the motel, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The weight that had been pressing down on me was gone. That night I actually slept. The next morning, we woke to a phone call from Richard. "You need to come back to the house," he said. His voice sounded strange, shaken. "Why?" my father asked. "Is something wrong? Did the spirits come back?" "No, nothing like that, but there is something you need to see." We piled into the car and drove back to the farmhouse. When we arrived, we found Richard and Catherine standing in the backyard, near the small cemetery I had discovered on my first day. "What is it?" I asked as we approached. Catherine pointed to Alina's grave, the one I had seen before, with the simple gray headstone. Except now there was something on top of it. A small bundle wrapped in cloth. I stepped closer and saw what it was. Flowers, fresh wildflowers carefully arranged. "Did you put those there?" my mother asked Richard. He shook his head. "They were here when we arrived this morning, and that is not all." He led us around to the back of the house. On the back door, written in what looked like chalk, was a message. "Thank you." "I think," Catherine said slowly, "that Alina wanted us to know she is at peace now, that she is grateful." I stared at the message, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. This thing, this entity that had terrorized us, that had hurt my mother and killed our cat, was thanking us. "She was in pain," Richard explained, as if reading my thoughts. "She had bound herself and her ancestors to this place out of loneliness and fear. By releasing them, by forcing them to move on, you actually freed them. That is what the ritual was designed to do, not to destroy them, but to help them let go." "So she was not evil?" Emily asked. "We had picked her up from the motel on the way." "Not evil," Catherine said. "Just desperate, and desperate people, living or dead, can do terrible things." We stood there for a long moment, looking at the message on the door. "So it really is over?" my father asked. "Yes," Richard said. "The house is clean. Whatever was here is gone now. You could move back in if you wanted to." "No," my mother said immediately. "No, we are done with this place." And she was right. Even knowing the spirits were gone, even understanding that Alina had not meant to be malicious, we could not live there. Too much had happened. Too many terrible memories were embedded in those walls. We spent that day clearing out our belongings from the farmhouse. Everything we had unpacked, we packed right back up. My father hired movers to come the next day to get the furniture. As we worked, I kept expecting something to happen. For a door to open on its own, for the temperature to drop, for shadows to appear in corners. But nothing did. The house was just a house now. When we were loading the last of the boxes into the car, Emily wandered off toward the cemetery. I followed her. She was standing in front of Alina's grave, looking down at the flowers. "Do you think she is happy now?" Emily asked, "wherever she is?" "I hope so," I said. "I am still mad at her for killing Mr. Whiskers," Emily said. "But I feel bad for her too. Being that lonely must have been horrible." "Yeah," I agreed, "it must have been." Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. One of Mr. Whiskers's toys, a little catnip mouse. She set it down on the grave next to the flowers. "For being trapped in that house with her," Emily said, "so she would not be completely alone." We stood there for a moment, paying our respects to the dead. Then we turned and walked back to the car. My father had already started calling realtors. The first one who came to look at the property was honest with us. "I will be straight with you," she said. "This house has a reputation in town. Everyone knows the story of Alina Marsh. It is going to be hard to sell." "We will take whatever we can get," my father said. "We just want to be done with it." It took 3 months, but eventually we found a buyer, a developer who wanted to tear down the house and build something new on the land. He paid well below market value, but we did not care. We just wanted it gone. The day they started demolition, we drove out to watch. We stood at the end of the long driveway as the excavators moved in, as the walls came down, as the house that had tormented us was reduced to rubble. And I swear, as the roof collapsed, I heard something on the wind, not a scream or a cry of anguish, but a sigh, a sound of relief. "Goodbye, Alina," I thought. "Rest in peace." That was 6 months ago. We now live in a small apartment in Lincoln, Nebraska. It is not much, just a 2-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of an old building, but it is normal. The floors do not creak unless someone walks on them. The doors stay closed when you close them. The temperature is controlled by a thermostat, not by angry spirits. Emily goes to a new school now. She has made friends. She smiles again. She even got a new cat, an orange tabby she named Pumpkin. My mother has recovered from her physical injuries, though she still has nightmares sometimes. We all do. There are nights when I wake up and feel for the protective amulet Catherine gave me, which I still wear around my neck, just in case. My father found a new job at an accounting firm here in the city. It does not pay as much as his old job, but it is enough. We are rebuilding. As for me, I have thrown myself into my work. My freelance business is growing. I have clients all over the country now, and I have started telling my story anonymously at first on forums and message boards dedicated to the paranormal. People have reached out to me, sharing their own experiences. I realize now that we are not alone. There are others who have faced what we faced, others who survived. If you are watching this video, if you have made it this far through my story, then I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. And if you have had experiences like ours, please share them in the comments. Talk about them. Do not keep them bottled up inside. The more we talk about these things, the less power they have over us. And please hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Share this video. Not for me, but for everyone else out there who thinks they are going crazy, who thinks they are alone. Let them know they are not. We still drive past the property sometimes. Where the farmhouse once stood, there is now just an empty lot. The developer abandoned his plans after several workers reported strange experiences during the demolition. Tools going missing, unexplained cold spots, shadows moving where there should not be shadows. The land sits empty now, waiting. I do not know if the ritual truly freed all the spirits, or if some part of Alena and her ancestors still lingers there, bound to the earth itself. I do not know if that land will ever truly be clean. What I do know is this: there are things in this world that we do not understand, forces that exist beyond our perception, waiting in the dark places, the forgotten places. And sometimes, through ignorance or bad luck or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, we stumble into their territory. When that happens, you have two choices. You can let the fear consume you, let it drive you to madness or despair. Or you can face it, acknowledge it, and find a way to move forward. We chose to move forward. But I will never forget what happened in that farmhouse. I will never forget the cold, the whispers, the shadows in the doorway. I will never forget Alena Marsh and the prison of loneliness she created for herself and her ancestors. And I will never forget the lesson I learned. Some houses are not meant to be homes. Some places are not meant for the living. And sometimes the only way to win is to walk away. The farmhouse in Millbrook, Nebraska is gone now, but its story remains. And as long as people remember, as long as they listen, Alena and her family will not be forgotten. Not by me, not by my family, and not by you. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay safe out there. And if you ever find yourself looking at a house that seems too good to be true, that feels wrong in ways you cannot quite explain, do yourself a favor. Walk away. Some deals are not worth making. Some houses should stay empty. They say that on quiet nights, if you stand at the edge of where the farmhouse used to be, you can still hear them. The whispers, the footsteps, the sound of doors opening and closing in a house that no longer exists. I have never gone back to check, and I never will.